The victory of Tululing turned the tide for India. Not only did it restore the country's faith in its army, it also changed the mood of the soldiers. Sullen despair gave way to assurance, courage, and belief. The recoveries made on Tululing gave the army its first accurate insight into the strength and motive of the enemy.
The turning point in the battle came once we got the Tululing feature. That was the beginning. Till then, we were working on a concept that they are 30-40 people. And if they are 30-40 people, a battalion should be able to handle the position. But our eyes got opened when we made very large recoveries of automatic weapons. In fact, after Tululing was captured, we found 8 machine guns and 4 grenade launchers, 4 rocket launchers, and many other weapons, which was equivalent to the firepower of almost a battalion. I would say here it was a platoon plus about 40 people, maybe 50 people who were there holding it, having that kind of firepower. Then we realized that this is the pattern that we are going to face. We changed our complete approach, and thereafter for every feature we went in from 3 to 4 directions. With 3 to 4 battalions, we went in with overwhelming superiority, and we went in from totally unexpected directions and surprised the enemy, and we were able to handle the situation better, and we were not looking back. Turning point was Tululing capture by 2 Rajref, and that gave the opening, and thereafter every feature in Dras sector fell one after the other.
As the army slowly recovered its confidence, the nation slowly regained its dignity. The Sensex inched upwards, the market stabilized, and a feeling of helplessness gave way to hope. Pakistani frustration, on the other hand, gave way to rage as they relentlessly target the 8 Div headquarters of General Puri. Puri himself had a miraculous escape but was forced to move his headquarters.
The day Tululing was captured and .4875, we were under his observation. He gave us a tremendous amount of shelling on our Div headquarters, and we had to finally leave that place and go to another place. And there, the commanding officer of my signal regiment, he was wounded. He was wounded in the legs, and he had to be evacuated. And also we lost 2 signalers in this heavy shelling.
In a gesture that had few parallels in modern history, Prime Minister Vajpayee flew to the front to visit his soldiers in Kargil. Even as he was addressing his troops in an act of extreme cowardice, the Pakistanis started shelling the area. Unruffled, Atal Bihari shrugged off the bombing in a humorous vein.
कल मैं कारगिल के इलाके में गया था। उन्होंने तोपें चलाकर सलामी दी।
Back in Delhi, he received a call from the White House expressing great appreciation for Indian restraint. Even as President Clinton called up Sharif to urge him to withdraw from Indian territory, Foreign Minister Jaswant Singh traveled to Beijing to brief Chinese leaders on the Indian stand. In Kargil, airstrikes continued to demoralize the Pakistani forces, even with strict orders not to cross the line of control or engage the enemy in Pakistani airspace. The Air Force flew on one wing, the other strapped firmly behind.
Now, as I may not have mentioned this, we were under some restrictions during these operations. We had very clear instructions that we were not to cross the line of control. This prevented us from executing the correct or the most optimum attack profiles or attack directions, and restricted our attacks.
Initially there was some disappointment from our side, because we did realize that the effects of Air Force, the effects of air power, will not be as fast as we would have liked had we been given the liberty to carry out interdiction on the other side of the line of control.
Despite these difficult conditions, the Air Force took a heavy toll on enemy morale. as they blew up a large ammunition dump and encampment in Manthodalo.
One of the targets very close to the line of control was a place called Munthodalo. This was a major supply camp and a transit point for the infiltrators. This camp was almost wiped out from the surface by the mirages.
Meanwhile, the conflict in Kargil was intensifying. Its maritime dimensions were coming to a boil in the Arabian Sea. Even though the Indian Navy had performed exceedingly well in 1971, memories of a sneak Pakistani attack in Dwarka in 1965 still rankled in their memory. At that time, they had been literally caught in the wrong ocean conducting exercises around the Bay of Bengal. India's elegant Chief of Navy Admiral Sushil Kumar had made sure that his ships would seize the initiative at sea. By the end of May, his commands in the west had increased their vigil as the Coast Guard's assets had been conjoined, even as their Dorniers augmented air searches. The aim was to prevent possible strikes by the Pakistani Navy. Defensive measures were implemented at all vital harbors and ports as the Eastern Fleet strike forces sailed for the west coast. Codenamed Operation Talwar, the Navy started conducting war games in the Arabian Sea. Sushil Kumar's aim was very clearly to prevent any enemy misadventure.
In a tactical sense, the swift and speedy deployment of our combined Eastern and Western fleets was meant to seize the initiative at sea in a decisive manner. Our battle groups remained well poised in case the Kargil conflict escalated and should it spill over into the Arabian Sea. In a strategic sense, our Navy's combat power was aimed at the soft underbelly of Pakistan. In a manner of speaking, this is what sea power is all about. And this was really the role that the Indian Navy played during the Kargil conflict in support of our brave comrades in the Army and Air Force who were fighting on the LOC.
The Admiral continued his build-up, putting the Pakistani Navy on the defensive. He parked his ships in international waters 12 nautical miles off Karachi in an extremely aggressive posture. The immediate threat was to choke the port of all oil supplies coming from the sea. The tactics of deterrence worked. The Pakistani Navy flashed messages to all its units to keep well clear of Indian ships and not to close in on any Indian Navy formations. Pakistani warships started escorting oil tankers as Pakistani ports prepared for defensive action. All this while intelligence reports confirmed the growing rift between Pakistan's Admiral Fasi Bukhari and General Parvez Musharraf. The Pakistani Navy claimed it had not been forewarned of the Kargil conflict. It also claimed it was still not getting accurate briefs. India's defense establishment, on the other hand, worked as one force. Close personal relationships between the Admiral, the Air Marshal, and the General enhanced professional competence, even as it cut through bureaucracy and red tape. With a defense minister who reached out to his forces and a prime minister who held his chiefs in great regard, the Indian establishment presented a strong, unified command structure. The much criticized Indian intelligence agencies tried to somewhat redeem themselves when they released a taped conversation between Parvez Musharraf and his Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Aziz, where they both derided Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and conspired to misinform him and the world of Pakistani motives and actions. Meanwhile, in Dras, shortly after the Prime Minister's visit, the Indian Chief of Army had flown over Tulaling to congratulate the brave soldiers of the 2 Raj Rifles on their conquest.
I went, I think, after 2 days. And I wanted to land on top of Tulaling. The helicopter pilot wouldn't hear of that. So I said, okay, let me just fly over these. And when I flew over Tulaling, I found there were these Rajarif boys all sitting together with only rocks to provide them some cover. It was their lunchtime, I think between 12 and 1 in the afternoon. Some of them were eating their food. So they waved out at me, and you cannot imagine the feeling when these boys were waving at me. I felt great for them and for the army.
Commissioned on the 6th of June, Malik was posted to the 3 Sikh Light Infantry. Following a distinguished career in the army, 9 years later, on the 20th of May 1968, Malik proposed to a young doctor in the Army Medical Corps. He married Dr. Ranjana on the 30th of September of that year. He commanded the 10 Sikh Light Infantry between 74 and 77 and the 162 Brigade between 83 and 85. In 1987, he took over the command of the 8th Mountain Division, which was to so gallantly fight the battles of Dras under General Puri. Malik was Corps Commander of the 11th Corps and Army Commander of the Southern Command before becoming the Vice Chief of the Army in 1996. After 45 years of being in uniform, he retires as the Chief on the 30th of September 2000. The same day, he completes 32 years of married bliss. He leaves one son in the Sikh Light Infantry who is also married to a doctor in the Army Medical Corps. As Chief of the Army, Malik's role was limited to planning at a macro level. He was to ensure that his troops all along the border in the Run of Kutch, in Punjab, in Rajasthan and in Jammu were ready for any eventuality. He was to ensure all logistical support to the Corps in Kargil. As Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he was to ensure coordination between the 3 services. He was to liaise with the political leadership. He was to guide the direction of the war. And he was eventually to lead India to military victory. But with all this, Malik also had time to deal with individual problems of junior officers.
I remember one Lieutenant Colonel, 2IC of a battalion. He wrote me a letter. He said that they were short of some radio sets and some other equipment. And it was a pathetic letter. Anybody in his position, perhaps he would have written. I didn't mind it one bit. It was an inland letter, a forces letter, which you write which you get in field areas. And he had written it on that. I rang up the Corps Commander and the Div Commander and I told them, this is the letter that I have received. Please make sure that he gets all the equipment that he needs and don't send this battalion into battle till they have got that. Incidentally, I replied to him in my own handwriting, not on a forces letter, but on a normal letter. But I wrote to him personally.
Though flying into the battle zone at least once a week, he gave his generals and brigade commanders complete freedom of planning and execution. A young major on the front, while describing his chief, paid him the greatest compliment when he said, "He's OG, completely olive green, a soldier to his boots." On one of Malik's visits to the front, he was to meet a young captain who had captured the imagination of the country with his one-liner, "Ye dil mange more."
I do remember an incident when some of these boys, including Batra, they met me after capturing the first feature. And he mentioned to me about Dil Mange More. And I asked him, I said, which is going to be your next attack? And he said he was ready for it, full of high spirit, the smile on his face and in his eyes. And I realized that with such young leaders, we shall win. The victory will be ours. That gave me a lot of confidence. In fact, whenever I needed confidence, I always went to the front. And these boys of 8 Mountain Div and 3 Mountain Div, they always raised my morale.
Young Batra belonged to the Tivra Tera, or the 13 Jammu and Kashmir Rifles. Raised in 1966 at Golconda, this unit was moving to Shahjahanpur after a stint in CI Ops in Supur, when it was moved to Gumri on the 10th of June for high-altitude warfare. Moving to Dras the next day, the unit was given 3 days to acclimatize. Despite the capture of Tululing, the Indian dominance of the Dras area would not be complete without the capture of point 5140.
Point 5140 was a very dominating feature in the Dras subsector. It not only dominated Tululing complex and the hump, but it also dominated the Dras village and a very large stretch of the National Highway 1 Alpha. It was from here that the enemy could bring down very effective observed artillery fire on Tululing, on Dras and the National Highway 1 Alpha in the area. And it was from here that the enemy fired the Stinger missile when it brought down one of our helicopters in the area of Tululing. Thus the importance of capturing 5140 at the earliest. 13 Jackrif was tasked for the capture of point 5140.
13 Jack got their first unfortunate taste of the war even before they went into battle.
On the 12th of June, we moved to Dras. However, once we moved to Dras, there was a big problem of where to locate the battalion, since all along the National Highway 1 Alpha, from Dras, a couple of kilometers on either side, there were artillery guns located there. And we are not supposed to locate the infantry unit next to a RT gun position because of the danger of counter bombardment. With the great difficulty, we could manage to locate a place close to Dras where we concentrated. However, later we suffered some casualties in this area because at night the enemy, the own mortar position which was firing close by, moved to its alternative position and moved further close to our unit location, and because of the enemy counter bombardment we suffered heavy casualties, including Major Ajay Jasrotia, who lost his life at the base itself while trying to evacuate casualties.
After the capture of Tululing, 13 Jack moved up to the peak. 18 grenadiers had already moved to capture the areas around Tululing called the Hump. The 13 Jack cleared the base of 5140 of all enemy presence. It was here that Major Joshi, Captain Jimmy Jamwal and Captain Vikram Batra held precarious positions, waiting for final orders for the assault. The orders that came for Joshi on the 19th of June were ones that he would remember all his life.
Once on Tululing top, I got a call from General Puri, who informed me that my commanding officer had been taken ill and had to be evacuated. And he promoted me and told me and gave me the command of the battalion.
Things were moving very fast for Joshi. Events were overtaking themselves. Even as the two captains and their newly promoted CO were finalizing their plans, an arty shell exploded at their firm base at the Hump complex. It was here that Joshi remembers with pride the role of his unit's doctor, Dr. Rajesh Adhau.
Our doctor, the RMO of the battalion, Captain Rajesh Adhau, did an excellent job during the Operation Vijay. He was full of initiative and quite a peppy character who used to move around doing things beyond what he is supposed to do. When the unit was going for the assault for 5140, he would get the companies together in a dead ground and give a big pep talk, to the extent he told the boys that I have to just touch any casualty and I can assure you that nothing will happen to him. And true to his word, till we deactivated from there, any officer, any casualty, any Jawan he touched, he reached, did not face any problems and sailed through effectively. And he himself was moving right up, so nobody had to come back to him. The doctor was there right in front, looking after the casualties.
This doctor had been a constant source of strength to his battalion. Before the start of the battle, he had gathered the assault troops, who were nearly all Dogras, and charged them up with a religious sermon. He assured them that he would be right behind them to look after all casualties. You have to be alive when I reach you, he said, and I promise I will save you.
this was a big morale booster for the entire battalion, because when the Jawans are assured that you've got such a good doctor, you know, who look after you, and he'll assure you that nothing will happen. So the morale was absolutely sky high, and the boys were really going. The doctor did a very, very good job. And another incident here is when we were in the area of Hump complex. Now we had an RT shell in the area of Hump, and we suffered 7 casualties. So I had to get a doctor immediately during daylight. So I told the doctor sitting at Hump that, doctor, you required immediately, please come down straight away. So without even, you know, a little bit of hesitation, the doctor, I could see sitting from Hump looking backward at Tolaling. He came running down a very, you know, marked track. And the moment he started, the enemy started firing onto him with direct weapons. And just like you see in the movies, the doctor was dodging the bullets, running down the track, and came down, and I was sitting there keeping my fingers crossed that whatever I had done, I shouldn't lose the doctor here. But fortunately, though running a little clumsily, you know, he's a doctor, not an infantry soldier, but he reached safely and was able to look after all the casualties.
Now Joshi briefed his 2 young company commanders on the details for the night's assault. They went up to Rocky Knob for a reconnaissance.
Gradient from Hump complex to 0.5140 was quite steep, and the movement was very slow. So therefore I emphasized to both the company commanders that we have to reach the top before first light, because if we are not able to reach the top before first light, then the enemy will not allow the companies to sit anywhere in between, and we'll suffer very heavy casualties. So Jamwal, who was one of the company commanders, he laughingly said, not to worry, in the morning before daybreak we'll get the success signal. So I asked the company commander, just to pep up the morale, I said, okay, what would be your success signal? I asked Jamwal. So he thought for a moment and he told me that, sir, my success signal would be, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I said, that's a very funny success signal. Why this? He said, sir, I am ex-NDA Hunter Squadron, and there we used to have this slogan. So I said, okay, you carry on with that. You have your success signal as, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I asked Vikram Batra, the other company commander, that what would your success signal be? He again thought for a moment and he told me that, sir, my success signal will be, ye dil mange more. I said, why this success signal? So he says that, sir, I'll capture the bunkers in that area, and thereafter I'll look for some more bunkers, some more enemy to capture and kill.
At 9 p.m., 21 batteries of the artillery opened fire on 5140, even as the 2 companies started their arduous climb. Hearty fire was to continue until the 2 companies were 200 yards from the top. Jimmy Jamwal, codenamed Sangram, skirted from the left between the thumbs-up feature and 5140 to lead his Bravo company from the western side to capture the left position. Vikram Batra, codenamed Shersha, started leading a frontal assault with his Delta company to eventually attack the right bunker and capture the right side of the feature. By 3 a.m., Jimmy Jamwal had blown up 3 Sangas, reaching very close to the enemy. Basketball champion Havaldar Meher lost his arm in arty shelling from the top, but his company continued the assault. At 3:35, Colonel Joshi, codenamed Chanakya, received a signal that was music to his ears.
Sir! Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah!
Jamwal moved to reinforce Shersha's attack. Climbing sheer rock surface, his company was in direct line of fire, making slow progress. The time moved from 3:30 to 4, then to 4:30. As the first rays of light slowly started illuminating the horizon, Joshi lost hope of seeing his young company commander. And then at 4:35, as the skyline was turning a light blue, the radio spluttered into life, immortalizing Vikram Batra's choice of phrase.
Ye dil mange more nahi hai, kya azm tha kis azm se wo jang laye the, दुश्मन की तरफ जोश में हर लम्हा बढ़े थे, लहराने तिरंगा वो फौजी, चोटी पे ऊंची कोई परवाज़ नहीं है।
Dearest Papa, Mama, Birdie and Granny, by the time you get this letter, I'll be observing you all from the sky, enjoying the hospitality of the Apsaras. I have no regrets. In fact, even if I become a human again, I'll join the army and fight for my nation. If you can, please come and see where the Indian Army fought for your tomorrow. Okay then, it's time for me to join my clan of the Dirty Dozen. My assault party has 12 chaps. Best of luck to you all. Live life king size. Yours, Robin. Young Lieutenant Vijayan Thapar of the 2 Rajputana Rifle died assaulting 3 pimples on the night of 28th and 29th June. The letter he wrote reached his parents after the news of his heroic death. His father, Colonel Thapar, came to Dras to fulfill his son's wishes and see for himself the place where his son and his colleagues of the 2 Rajputana Rifles gave up there today. After the capture of Tololing, the 2 Rajputana Rifles had rested for 10 days, after which they were brought in to capture the 3-pimple Black Rock Knoll complex. This was to be the most difficult and most bloody battles fought in Dras. This battle was to see the maximum officer casualties in the entire 50-day war. Apart from Vijayan Thapar, his immediate senior Major Padampani Acharya and Captain Nekasake Kengruzi from Nagaland were also to lay down their lives that night. The youngest casualty of the desert warriors, Vijayan Thapar, was steeped in the tradition of services, being a 4th-generation army officer.
In fact, I just met Colonel Thapar. He's an old course mate of mine. He lost his son Vijayant, and we were commissioned together. We joined the battalions together. We were in NDA together, and Vijayant Thapar is a 4th generation in the army.
Having seen just 6 months of service, the young lieutenant was only 22 years old, but even at this young age, he was very sure what he wanted.
Very, very enthusiastic youngster and a very idealistic man, that this is what is to be, this is what the nation should do, this is what I should do, this is what my father should do, this is what my mother should do, this is what my brother should do. He had a very idealistic view of the world and he lived by it. He thought, okay, this is my duty to go ahead, he will be there. You don't have to tell him that you be there. So he was that kind of a man. And he was a very good singer. I still remember that song, which is I think the favorite song of his, which would say, "Lovely Lips." I can't sing that song, but I still remember the way he used to sing that song. It was great.
Vijayan's preference of music were wide, but he was passionately attached to songs of the film Border.
You name it, he used to sing it. It's a Punjabi song, he'd sing a Punjabi song, Hindi, some pop, he'd do a Daler Mehndi type of Bhangra, switch on to something else, on to Border. Very fond of Border, that cassette.
Yeah, when we were in Myanmar, before we launched our first attack on Tololing, the only thing which used to play in his room was Border on full blast music. Every time he used to call us, "Sir, aaja, yahan par ek baar gaane sunte hain aake." And the same song used to repeat again and again.
In the last week of June, with songs of Border blaring in the camp, the battalion was preparing for its next assault. The Karni Mata idol was brought out for worship. This idol is only brought out during war. The story goes that a soldier in the regiment found it in Mesopotamia during the Second World War. His company had been surrounded by the enemy on 3 sides. The remaining side was a huge minefield. That night, a soldier saw Karni Mata in his dream. The next morning, a little lamb appeared who led the entire company out of the minefield. At the edge of the fields, the lamb led them to a statue of Karni Mata. The soldier who found it used to hang it around his neck whenever the regiment went into battle. Since then, it has always been in the unit. It's worshipped during war, and when the soldiers go into battle, one of them carries it around his neck. The presence of the idol, the soldiers believe, is the reason why the two Rajputana rifles have never lost a battle.
It's a very old image. It was always carried into war. In fact, Madan Saab used to carry it on his chest, like, he used to put it in a cover, red cover, and he used to literally carry it on his chest into the war field. It is always with the Alpha Company. Every evening, they used to have Aarti, and that time